Welcome to the Mobility Innovators Podcast.
Hello everyone, I'm so happy to welcome all the listeners from around the world to Mobility Innovators Podcast. I'm your host, Jaspal Singh. Mobility Innovator Podcast invites innovators in the transportation and logistics sector to share their thought about the key changes in the sector, about their work, and what is their forecast for the future. When I was thinking about my first guest, it was a very easy choice for me. I know someone who is heading a 135-year-old international organization, having more than 2,000 members in 100 countries. The person I really admire and feel inspired. I'm so happy to welcome Mohamed Mezghani, Secretary General of International Association of Public Transport. It's time to listen and learn. Hello, Mohamed. Thank you so much for accepting our invite. We are so fortunate to start our innovation journey with you.
Hello, Jaspal, and thank you very much for offering me this opportunity to participate in this podcast.
Thank you, Mohamed. Today, I'll be spending time to learn more about your leadership strategy, about you and your perspective on mobility. So to start with, I would like to ask you to share a little more about yourself and about UITP to our listener.
So I was born in Tunisia 58 years ago, grew up there, graduated in industrial engineering. Then I moved to Paris, where I studied transport and where I started working after those studies. I'm currently the Secretary General of UITP. So Secretary General means Executive Director of UITP, which is the International Association of Public Transport. UITP is a very old non-for-profit association established in 1885 in Belgium. It gathers the public transport operators, the public authorities and regulators of mobility, the supplying industry, consultants, universities with interest in urban mobility. So in total is about 2,000 organizations, more or less from 100 countries. And UITP covers all urban and suburban mobility solutions, including metros, tramways, buses, ferries, shared modes, taxis, ride-hailing. So I would say every mode except the individual use of cars. And our mission is to advocate for public transport and sustainable mobility, to grow knowledge and research in this field, and also act or offer a platform for mobility stakeholders where they can meet, they can work together and help them develop their vision and business in the field of public transport.
Great, thank you for sharing this. And I know like UITP history of 135-year-old is a big national archive for Belgium government. You know, like you mentioned, you started your career long back in transportation. I think it's like more than 32 years now in transportation, out of which 23 years are with UITP. So it showed that you really love UITP. That's why you're sticking around for so long. So I'm curious to know, how did you start working in mobility sector, and actually what motivated you to continue to work in the same sector for so long? I mean, 32 years, it's long period, and something which is not on your LinkedIn. So something I want to know, which is personal to you.
Actually, it started when I was a student in Tunisia in the engineering school. I remember we had a visiting professor from the Polytechnical School of Lausanne in Switzerland. It's a very famous school in mobility and transport. And he was there to teach us transport during 1 week. We had a 1 week seminar about transport. And I liked very much his lesson and the link with my everyday life of being a regular user of public transport since I was a child, actually. So he was talking about issues that were very concrete for me, which was not the case in many matters we were studying at that time. You know, we studied a lot of matters in the engineering school, and some of them are very theoretical, but this one was very applied to real life. And at the end of the year, I decided to continue studying transport in France. So I moved to France. I joined it's called the École Nationale des Ponts et Chaussées in Paris. It's also the highway school in Paris for a master in transportation. And since then, I have been working in the transportation sector for my whole career. First, I started working in a public organization in the field of energy efficiency of urban mobility. So you see, it's a topic which is very, very important now. Then in a consulting company, a French one, mainly working in Africa and in Eurasia. And then in UITP since 1999, where I started as a researcher and then had many other positions, including the management of the work program of the association, the development in MENA in the Middle East and North Africa, where I established the Dubai office, the management of the global summit of the association for many years, and now Secretary General since January 2018.
That's really a remarkable journey, and I really love how it started, with that 1 week lecture. I just want to now touch upon, because being a global leader, you're meeting a lot of people around the globe and all. And you've seen the pandemic has really a big negative impact on the transportation and travel industry. It's very sad that transport agency lost 50% of their ridership. I mean, kudos to your leadership. UITP did a wonderful job by sharing some of the best practices with member. Now you're meeting CEO and high-level executive and transit agencies and industry. Can you share a glimpse of some of the backroom discussion you have with these leaders, like what they are thinking? Are they talking about funding, technology, organizational restructuring, staff? Like what kind of discussion you have with these leaders?
Actually, the pandemic has had and still having important impacts on public transport. You may remember that most agencies lost 90 to 95% of their ridership during the first 2-3 months of the pandemic in 2020. Now, after almost 2 years, they recovered, let's say, 60 to 80% of the pre-pandemic levels. The discussion happening also actually evolved with the different phases of the pandemic. So first, it was about learning how to operate in this new context for which the sector was not prepared at all. I mean, this disinfection and physical distancing and all the things are new to public transport. Then it was also about showing the essential role of public transport by making sure there is a continuity of operation during the lockdown. You remember that in our cities, the cities were closed, but the doors of public transport remained open for everyone. And so it was very important to show the essential role of public transport. Then it was important also to advocate to get the needed financial support for the sector, because we have seen number of sectors like the car industry, the tourism industry, for example, they got financial support from the governments, but public transport was not was like at the end of the list of sectors to be supported. So it was important for us to advocate for that. Then the pandemic offered also the opportunity to accelerate some projects, in particular digitalization of the network, for example, and the service. We have seen a lot of contactless ticketing projects that were implemented during that due to this crisis, because we wanted to avoid contacts during payments, etc. And so these projects were implemented. Also, we have seen a lot of apps supporting the travelers, also scheduling of the service. So all of things related to digitalization have been implemented during this pandemic context. Then I would say one important issue was also about how to improve the resilience of the sector to be better prepared for future pandemics, but also better prepared for natural catastrophes, climate events. So the pandemic made it clear and essential to have a resilient public transport system. Also, decarbonization has been on the top of the agenda. It's not a new topic, of course, but this crisis has confirmed the negative impacts that cars are having on our environment. Remember, during the lockdown, these empty streets that made us realize how much space is wasted for cars. And it made it clear that sustainable mobility can only be achieved thanks to walking, to cycling, to public transport and shared mobility. So it's one of the main lessons of this crisis. And these were the topic, I would say, discussed with public transport leaders and advanced during this context. And so, as you can understand, the pandemic offered the opportunity to put mobility and public transport on the political agenda. And that's really one great silver lining of the crisis. And so, yeah, it was not just a crisis or just a challenge. It offered also a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, no, you rightly mentioned, a lot of new innovation happened during the adverse time, and nobody can forget the images of clear sky and dolphin in Venice River and all, when human were not there, or we have no car on the street and all. And this actually, very good segment to move to our next question, because I think you are one of the firm believer and user of new technology and processes. I mean, you love Twitter, and you love to adopt new technology. I always see anything new come, you always try to see how it can be used in public transportation. And in fact, you have implemented a lot of new tools within UITP as well in last 2 years. How do you think technology will shape up the future of mobility?
I think technology first is an accelerator of changes. It offers opportunities to make mobility more efficient, maintenance more predictive, let's say public transport more customer focused. And we see the impact of technology, for example, in the decarbonization of transport through the electrification, through the introduction of zero emission vehicles, for example. Also, automation is making public transport more flexible to operate and safer. So there are endless possibilities offered by technology, and those technology, those possibilities and opportunities really are making the life of the customers, of the end user, easier, and making it easier to navigate in public transport systems and network, easier to pay, easier to get the information. So a lot of opportunities. But, and there is a but, technology remains a means to an end, and it's a tool. So we should not forget it. I mean, it's an operational solution and not a policy in itself. So first, we need to define policy priorities. We need to have clear strategies. We need to define the strategic level, I would say, and then see how technology can help implement the policy, and not the other way around. So sometimes, in some cases, there are some policymakers that will start talking about technologies before even telling you clearly what is their strategy, what they want to achieve. And technology will not define what we want to achieve. We have first to define it ourselves and to dare to take those, to define those objectives, and then technology will certainly help. And that's the good thing with technology, that it will make us do things quicker, faster, and in a more efficient way.
Thank you, Mohammed. You raise actually a very good point about the technology. I love what you said. It's technology is the acceleration of change, and then technology is a tool. It's not the mean. It's not the end. It's come to the next point, which is about you are one of the biggest supporter of public transportation, and at the same time, you love to promote all innovations and all. Cities are very excited about autonomous mobility, ride sharing, e-scooters, and many other tools, urban air mobility, and all. Do you think both worlds can coexist and grow together? I mean, there is a scope and space for the traditional transportation and new mobility to exist.
I would like to say that public transport is not just about mass transit. For me, public transport is any mobility solution which is publicly accessible and which could be shared either over space, like we are all in the same car or the same bus, or over time, like we have a vehicle which is used by different successive users, I would say. And this is how I define public transport. So it means it's mass transit as the backbone, and this is very important, complemented by shared and on-demand mobility solutions. And it's, at the end, everything except the individual use of cars. Really, I would like to insist on that. It's a wider scope of public transport. And this is the only way we have to reduce traffic congestion. because we'll need less vehicles, since most of them will be shared or used collectively. So that's my approach, I would say, for public transport. And you mentioned autonomous vehicles, for example. So autonomous vehicles could be part of the solution, of course, with the condition that they are not used individually, but part of a fleet of shared and on-demand shuttles complementing mass public transport, which remains the backbone. And if you see, I mean, this vision actually put people at the heart, because with such mobility system, we move people and not cars. We better use the road space in favor of people, and we free a lot of space which is now used for parking, for example, and give it back to people. So, I mean, the question was how do you think both worlds can coexist together? They can coexist, of course, and with the condition that we define our mobility system by putting people at its heart.
No, that's a great point, and I agree with you. I really want to highlight one of the report published by UITP about autonomous mobility, that it's a great tool if it's used as a shared mobility, not as individual mobility.
Indeed.
So that's a great point. And I think now the biggest challenge, like you mentioned about new technology and innovations and all these kind of stuff, we are seeing a big demographic shift, from baby boomer to millennial to generation Z, and very soon generation alpha, people who are born after 2010, or you can say TikTok generation. I would love to hear your view on like how public transport agencies can attract new generation of passenger, because once people are getting old, you need new passenger. How to attract them to bring to public transportation?
If we look to those new generation of passengers, I would say, contrary to the baby boomers, this new generation of travelers, they are born in a context which is not in favor of cars, I would say. So increasing traffic congestion, growing pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, more road accidents, and so on. So really, they are born in that context. And also, more and more young people don't want a driving license. We see it in many countries, and because they have an increasing awareness, environmental awareness amongst those young people, and also because there are more and more mobility solutions available to them. I just mentioned, this combination between mass transit and on-demand vehicles, for example. So they have diverse solutions, from walking to cycling to public transport, shared and on-demand solutions. So the young people, they see the benefits this solution bring in terms of flexibility and availability. And they can personalize their mobility package based on their needs, which can vary from day to day, or depending on the purpose of the trip, or even during the day, they may use different modes of transport based on the purpose of their trip. And also they are familiar with digital tools, which make all these solutions accessible at their fingertips. So you see, I mean, they are ready for that. They are ready for this combination of modes, I would say. And if we want to attract them in public transport, in this shared mobility, and in this wider scope of public transport, I would say, it's also important to show them how public transit can help them in their life, making sure the services are available to access their jobs, their leisure activities, not just during peak hours, but also late evening and during weekends, because it's important that they feel there is always a solution to their mobility need. Because if we want them to avoid owning a car and having a car, but jumping in public transport or in this on-demand mode. So in other words, I would say it's important to make them think public transport as their preferred mobility choice.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And actually, you're very right that they already have all the tools. It's just they need to be incentivized by providing a service which suit to their requirement, providing late evening services, weekend services when they use more. That's great. In the beginning, you mentioned that you started working in MENA. And I would say when you started talking about public transportation in MENA, you were the only one, and you actually started a movement. Now, we see big development happening in MENA. So, like I would say both MENA and Africa, the whole Africa region were not a good example of public transportation. But things are changing very fast, and we are witnessing a big investment, in Dubai, in Saudi, and all. Like, Saudi Arabia will launch one of the biggest metro system in Riyadh in one go. Nobody has done that ever. Similarly, Africa is seeing a lot of technology. What do you think the public transport landscape will change in these regions in next 10 years? What are the potential you see in both MENA and Africa?
Yeah, indeed, there is an amazing development of public transport in the region. But I would say there are also differences between countries in the MENA region and in Africa in terms of evolution of mobility. Some of the countries, in particular in North Africa, and if I take Tunisia, for example, my own country, those countries, they have a tradition of public transport. They have a history of public transport. Public transport is not new to them. Other countries, and especially in Africa, the mobility system is based on informal transport, or used to be based on informal transport. And more recently, we have seen the development of large public transport projects, such as in the Gulf countries, but also in South Africa, in Egypt, in the Maghreb countries, in Senegal. They inaugurated recently the new suburban rail system, for example. Yeah. So this reflects an increasing awareness that cities need mass transit as their backbone, and an increasing awareness amongst the policymakers also in these countries. And even those which were designed around car usage, like cities like Dubai or Doha or Riyadh, where the cost of oil is very cheap, and hence the use of cars, they have revisited their priorities to develop public transport systems. So it's a very positive development. Also, what's interesting is that in all those cities in MENA, and also in African cities, some of them, they opt for the latest technologies, the same ones implemented in Europe or in Asia, and for some of them even more advanced technologies. And this is new. I mean, public transport used to be seen as the mode for those who have no choice. Now it is seen. It is not seen anymore as a low quality service for low income people, but a solution which contributes to the development of a better quality of life, a solution that boosts the economy. And really what is happening now in the Gulf, for example, or in Morocco, for example, really with the investment they are putting in public transport, it's because they really believe public transport will develop the economy and will improve the quality of life of people. So this is a major change in the perception of public transport by policymakers in those regions. Also, one important element is the increasing use of apps for ride-hailing services, for example, in this country. Some of them also developed locally by local startups. So this is also a very interesting development. So I would say, definitely, I mean, public transport has a bright future in this region and will develop rapidly in the coming 10 years. And I'm very happy of this development because it shows that public transport is universal, is not exclusive to one region or to a certain category of cities, but it's a universal solution for everyone.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's and you really touch an important point that how public transport can help the economic development of the city. And we are seeing happening in Dubai and Riyadh and some of the cities which were, the cost of oil is so cheap, but still they are relying more on public transportation. I just want to touch base one important point, which is personal to you as well. I mean, not many people know that you are a researcher at heart. You love to do research and understand topic and build some report. I mean, you did one study on electronic ticketing in public transportation in 2008, long back, and in that study you cover about NFC, smart cars, interoperability. I mean, nobody was talking about those things at that time. People were not thinking, and which is happening now, and many things have really changed in last 1 decade. What's your view on ticketing? You mentioned about the contactless ticketing adoption during the pandemic and all. So what's your view on the future of ticketing and mobility as a service, which is a buzzword everywhere? We hear about mass everywhere. What do you think the future of this?
Jaspal, I'm myself surprised because people are still contacting me regarding this study of 2008. because it's somewhere on internet.
Oh, it's
And
a lovely study.
I still receive emails from people saying, "Oh, would like to have a discussion with you about ticketing, etc., about smart card." But I tell them, "Look, I am not involved anymore as an expert in this field, so I cannot do the same thing I did some years ago." But yeah, ticketing is an important tool in making public transport more attractive. Of course, it's obvious. If people struggle to understand how it works, to get the right ticket, they will refrain from using public transport. So it's important to use, for example, you mentioned electronic ticketing. So it offers the opportunity to make it simple to access public transport, even if you don't know in detail how the fare is calculated. You think about smartphones, for example, about mobiles. Yeah? You don't know the details about how the fare is calculated, but it's so easy to use your smartphone. So public transport should be as easy as using a smartphone, and electronic ticketing contributes to that. And there are many examples of cities which increase the use of public transport thanks to smart ticketing. In London, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, I mean, these are very emblematic cities, I would say. And since the future of mobility depends on the capacity to combine mass transit with shared and on-demand services, it's then essential to have a ticketing system that supports this approach. And this is where mass mobility as a service is key. And you are right to mention this. And then mass is, I would say, the tool that will make booking and paying possible for all modes combined. And it makes it possible at the end to plan and pay door to door and not just station to station. And this is important because the moment of truth, I would say, is when you are at home or in your office and you have to decide which mode you are going to use. And if there you have already the possibility to plan your trip, to pay for it door to door, then it will make it easy to opt for public transport. And that's what mass can bring to the people. So at the end, people, and I insist again, they will not need to own a car because there will be always a solution to answer their expectation. And the mass can offer that. So mass has a great potential, but needs a spirit of collaboration and trust between the different stakeholders, because mass involves a lot of stakeholders. Mass public transport, of course, but also on-demand, shared mobility systems, etc., bike sharing, car sharing, etc. And so we need the collaboration and the trust between the different stakeholders to make it easy. And I insist on making easy, because if it's easy, people will use it. And that's how I see the potential of mass.
Well, that's a great point. You mentioned, I really love what you said, from station to door to door. That's a mass can build, and it's all about trust and collaboration. One question, as being a Secretary General of UITP, and you mentioned, we have member in 100 countries, and you keep traveling. Because of pandemic it stopped, but you are like a global trotter, and you travel so many countries around the world. So in short, I can say you're like a global public transportation expert. What do you think different countries and continent can learn from each other?
You're right to say I'm a globetrotter. I have been working actually in an international context for my whole career since I started, except the first 2 years actually. So more than 30 years now working in an international context. And one of the lessons I learned after visiting tens of cities is that there is not one city or one country or one continent which has succeeded in every aspect of mobility or public transport. So that's why, I don't like when we speak about best practice. For me, there are only good practices. There are good practice cases everywhere in the world, and we can learn from every city, every country, and every continent. So, as I said, there is not such best practice, but only good practices, because there is always something missing that you can learn from another city. The perfection doesn't exist in public transport or in the mobility field. And also what I learned is that all those who say, oh, this is not possible in my city, or they say we have cultural specificities which prevent us to change, I mean, these people these are people who are inventing reasons for not doing things.
Mm.
And there is always room for change and improvement, but sometimes it needs political courage. So when they say, we have local specificities, blah, 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 it means we don't dare to change. Not we cannot change. You can change, but you have to dare. So, and having said that, also the learning experience should consider the institutional arrangements, the regulatory framework, for example, the historical consideration that in some cases prevent to replicate projects. Because, we can see a very good project in one city, but it's not that obvious to replicate it the same way in my city because the institutional context is not the same, because the regulatory framework is different. So it means that those projects need to be redefined considering the local conditions, but there is always a way to do it. So, and that's one of the lessons I learned really is that you can get inspiration from any city in the world, from any continent. And I'm happy to see that the good practice cases, they could be, in Bogota for BRT, for example, or in Singapore for the role of a transport authority, or in Moscow for the number of electric buses they have there, or in Nigeria, in Lagos, they have redefined BRT locally by creating this concept of light BRT, for example. So you see, there are now. I'm happy to see in Dubai they have the longest driverless metro system in the world.
Yeah.
You see everywhere, and that's the beauty of public transport. Again, it's a universal solution.
Well, that's thank you for sharing this point. Now I'll never say best practices. I'll always say good practices, and sharing such good example. Like, you are actually right. It's never, like, pandemic has shown that, and I think UITP was champion in that perspective, sharing a lot of knowledge from across the globe, good practices from different countries with each other. So that's a great point. A lot of people don't know that you are big fan of football, and I really love the way you draw the business and leadership lesson from the game. I mean, you bring some of the remarkable lessons from football for the leadership, for the management and all. What do you think the football can teach to leaders in mobility sector?
Oh, football. I'd say football is a school actually where we can learn a lot about leadership, about team organization, about teamwork. So I would say, and not just the leaders in mobility can learn from football, but any leaders. For example, a company. If we take a company is a team of people. Football, if we want players to play well together, they need to practice. They do it, by the way, on a daily basis to be ready for the match.
Yeah.
And this is to say also that training is essential at all levels of the company. Practicing, training, it's important. And you can never say, I have learned everything. No, you have to do it. And even the most professional football players, they have to do it every day. Even those stars, they have to do it every day. In football, the objective is clear. It's to score, to win the match. It's the same in a company. It must be clear to all employees. What are the objectives we are pursuing? Where the company is headed to. So it's important for a leader to express those objectives and share them with the employees. And sometimes you find in companies where employees, they don't know at the end why we are doing this. Where do we want to go? Also, a coach of a football team, of course, he or she manages the team. They define the strategy for the game. They motivate each player to make them give the most of themselves. But the coach doesn't play in the team. So that's how a leader should behave, by empowering the team, but not doing by himself, by keeping himself out of the game and making the players feel responsible, feel accountable of what will be done. They are the one who have an impact on the final result. The coach can only be there to coach them, of course, to motivate them, to give them the tools to perform better. And there are many of such examples in football. I have always been interested by two characters that are not those who generally attract attention of the majority in football. First, the goalkeeper.
Yeah.
We often speak about the stars in the team, but we rarely mention the goalkeeper. But I love goalkeepers because for me they are the last bastion of the team. It's the one in charge of the ultimate defense. He steers the defense. He safeguards the house. And he has an overall vision of the game. When you are a goalkeeper, you see the whole pitch, so you can have a vision of the game. And when I was young, I used to go to the stadium, and I liked sitting behind the goalkeeper to put myself in his shoes, and it was my way to be a goalkeeper. Mm-hmm. And the other character I have always been interested in is the coach, the trainer. The one who defines the strategy for the game, who finds the right words to motivate the team, who invents the right formula to make people with different origins, different ways of playing, different mentalities, different ages, different experiences play together and give the best of themselves for the benefit of the team. And that's exactly what a leader is expected to do in his or her organization. Think about a company. You have people from different nationalities, different mentalities, different culture, but you need to find the magic formula that will make them perform the best. And I am impressed by a coach who takes the lead of a team and makes this team progress and eventually win. They start from scratch almost, and they progress and win. And the coach who define at the end the right strategy and succeed to win against stronger teams. Think about competitors of a company, for example, these stronger teams. He dares to change the position of a player, reorganizing a team, reorganizing the company, replace a player by another one to make the team win. And this is for me something very inspiring that I learned from football. And there are coaches even who have invented the new ways of playing, who made us discover new players, who made us discover new talents. That's also one thing we can learn from football. So my dream was not to become a good field player, but to become a goalkeeper or a coach in football. And now, of course, I am not a professional footballer, but in my position, I feel myself like the coach of a football team. And I love that. So, Jaspal, you wanted me to talk about public transport, and now I'm talking about football.
Kind of lesson and the kind of thing you brought from the game, it's remarkable, and that's important. And if you allow, I may ask the follow-up question. You said you love goalkeeper, and nobody recognized the importance of goalkeeper. And you shared one story, a recent game where the goalkeeper actually scored.
Yes.
He came forward and he scored for the team. And I really love where you mentioned that during pandemic, that's a goal of every employee should be, not to be stand in one corner, but come in the front and play and all. What do you feel? Who should be the goalkeeper in the company? Is it the CEO? Is it the every employee should be the goalkeeper? Who should be the goalkeeper in the company?
When I talked about the goalkeeper, I said, something I like is that the goalkeeper is the one who have a view on the whole team, because he's in a position where he can see the whole pitch, and it means that from time to time we have to take some distance to observe. And if you are always, doing things, without taking time to take distance, to think, to see things from different perspective, you can't change the way you are doing things. So everyone can be one of those goalkeepers, and that's possible for everyone indeed. But for sure, the heads of departments, the chief officers, etc., they have to put themselves in this kind of situation more often than someone who is an expert in his field or someone who is a junior manager, where these people, they are more in the production, I would say, and less in the reflection.
That's a great point. You have so much to share. I have one more question for you, and it's actually I mean you have a mission, and a lot of people don't know how to involve women in the public transportation and mobility sector. A lot of people don't know you have a clear policy about MENA, like you will never participate in a panel where there is no woman speaker, or and it's a personal mission. And I must congratulate you because in last 2 years we have seen a remarkable change in situation. What do you think? What's stopping the female executive to participate in mobility sector, and how it can be done? How one can promote more female executive in the mobility sector?
No, thank you for mentioning this, because it's a topic which is very close to my heart. Because I believe in the benefits of diversity, and this diversity is, of course, more women and men working together, but also diversity in terms of nationalities, in terms of profiles of people in general, and that's very important. I think if we want public transport to attract more women, if we want to have more women interested in public transport, it's important that the way we profile also the sector, it's that we need to profile it to make it more attractive to women. We need also to make sure that there is no bias when we interview people, when we recruit people, but making sure, for example, in a panel, when you interview candidates, we have women and men in those panels, and not men only. I like this example of the transport company in Montreal, where they decided to have mixed panels. And once they took the decision, they realized that they are hiring much more women in the company. It's a very simple solution. It's about also being more attentive and more understanding to the specificities of women, or to their family conditions sometimes, because we all know, I mean, they are much more involved in their families than men. And so sometimes we need to understand the flexibility they are asking. And this flexibility should not prevent them to grow in the company. And we have to accept this, and also to understand that diversity is a benefit for the company. I mean, when we discuss topics and you have men and women discussing those topics, you come with much more opportunities, much more possibilities for the solution when you define the solution you are discussing. So that's very important, and we need also to fight this cliche that some people have in mind. Sometimes, oh, but this is not for women, or this job is not good for women, or no, that's wrong. There is no job which is not good for women, or a job which is good only for men. So we have to open our mind, and I would like to finish by sharing a very personal story. Is that I was born in Tunisia, as I told you, during the 60s. At that time, Tunisia was one of the countries where among the Arab countries where the woman condition, or when women were the most free compared to other Arab countries. And this is thanks to the president of Tunisia, who led the country in the 50s after the independence, and who was one of the first to declare let's say the to encourage the emancipation of women. And I was born in a family after 5 sisters, and I grew up in that family, seeing my 5 sisters succeeding in their studies, in their professional life. And for me, I was not realizing at that time that they had to fight for that. You know, for me, I was seeing them succeeding, and for me, it was obvious that this is how women are developing, and this is how women are growing in this society. And I discovered later, don't know, that they had to fight for that it was not obvious for them. And so I learned from them a lot. I learned, and they inspired me. And it is one of the reasons also for me, it's very natural to fight for women to have a better place in the society and a better place in public transport.
Thank you for sharing. Well, and I really love this mission. And we are seeing some change, we are seeing more and more female participation in events and in a lot of trainings and all other places. Great. So, I mean, we are at the end of our discussion. So I have a short fire question round. And I'll ask you 5 questions and you need to just answer it quickly. Just don't think too much about it. Just say whatever comes to your mind. First question, if you're ready, I can just quickly throw this question to you.
Okay.
So if you were not in mobility sector, what other profession you would have selected?
Maybe a writer, a stage actor, a singer, a musician, an artistic profession, I would say. Or a football coach.
Oh, great. You can still be a football coach, bringing some learning from leadership to football. How many countries you have traveled so far and which is your favorite?
I think about 75 to 80 countries.
Okay.
And the favorite is always the next one, Jasper. The next one I will discover. This will be my favorite.
That's a great point. What's your favorite public transportation network? Which city has a favorite?
Yeah, I would say, I love London's red buses. They are iconic and so different from any other cities. Also, I love the Moscow metro, for example, for its efficiency and its beauty. So, choosing a favorite one is not that easy, but, those two, London for the red buses and Moscow for the metro, I love them.
Oh, great. The next question may be difficult for you. Who's your favorite business leader in mobility sector?
There is one person who inspires me and who impresses me is, unfortunately, he passed away last year, is Jaime Lerner, who invented the BRT. He's a Brazilian. He used to be the mayor of Curitiba, who was the first city where a BRT was implemented. And actually, he invented the BRT. He got a budget to build the metro. And he said, with this budget, instead of building, X kilometers of metro, I will build 10 times more BRT lines. And so he invented something which makes public transport system more affordable for every country. So and he came not just with the BRT, but with a new way of integrating between urban planning and public transport. And so really, I had the opportunity to meet him, and I really very inspiring, and I'm learning a lot from him.
No, that's a great choice. That's a great choice. And the last question is, if you can change one thing in life, what would it be?
In my life, I will not change anything. I'm happy and I'm lucky. But in life in general, I would say, anything that makes people healthier and happier. Of course, if I have the possibility to do that, I would do it.
That's great, Mohamed. I mean, it's so fun to talk to you, and thank you so much for your great insight. I really love this conversation.
Thank you very much, Jaspal. I enjoyed very much talking to you, and thanks.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. We will be inviting some other inspiring guests in coming weeks. You can subscribe us online to get the notifications. If you have any feedback and suggestion for this podcast, please do write to us at info@mobility-innovators.com. See you next time. Thank you.